Welcome to Talent Freaks with Andy Coon. I'm Andy, a filmmaker and photographer based in the Bay Area of California. This podcast delves into the journeys of creative individuals who inspire curiosity and impact through their work. In this episode, which is part one of a two-parter, we're revisiting a conversation from 2008 with Harvey Robinson, a filmmaker and creative storyteller known for his unique visual style and passion for independent filmmaking. As a director and cinematographer, Harvey has worked on a wide range of projects, from commercial work to music videos and documentaries, always bringing an artistic and human-centered approach to his storytelling. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe and rate Talent Freaks on your favorite podcast platform. It helps others discover these inspiring stories, and I'm truly grateful for that. Now, let's jump back to 2008 and let the younger version of my filmmaking self introduce you to Harvey Robinson. In this round, I converse with Harvey Kent Robinson of Monkeywhale.com. Now, Monkeywhale.com is a North Carolina-based new media experiment with a dedicated staff of videographers, audio engineers, photographers, and bloggers whose singular motive is to save the monkey whale through an exploitation of integrated communication and the interdisciplinary arts. Monkeywhale Productions is a full-service commercial production company, which goes into Harvey's kitchen. In Harvey's kitchen, Harvey Robinson shoots video interviews with local artists in Greensboro, North Carolina. He shot over 60, I don't know, Harvey, what is it, 60 or 70 different interviews since October, which makes it roughly about 6 to 7 months. And he's posted most of them on monkeywhale.com. So check it out if you have not seen it. This is part one of two parts of a conversation with Harvey Kent Robinson. Enjoy. And I'm with Harvey. Now, do you go by Harvey Kent Robinson or just Harvey Robinson?
Usually just Harvey Robinson or Harvey.
Okay. Well, I'm here with Harvey Robinson, Harvey from Harvey's Kitchen and monkeywhale.com. A Greensboro resident who I came in contact with at a Dot Matrix show, which my brother produces and created. And the first time I ever saw your work was really, I guess, on Sean's blog. It was so different than anything else that I've seen. It was really it was shot so beautiful, man. I mean, you do a lot really beautiful work, and you really capture I would say, the soul of the person you interview. Especially when he did that one on Sean. That was really, that was a really emotional piece. But I love it. Like the first one you did on Eating the Invaders. It was, I knew half the people involved. I was just like, oh, there's Maddie. We used to. What's Mike's nickname? Gino.
Gino.
Yeah, Gino. Uh-huh. I used to work with those guys over at Pieworks. It's just small, Greensboro. It's funny. You see these, artistic people, and they have to make money somehow. Mm-hmm. We all do, and then you see them doing their own thing, and it's really nice to see. But one of the things I want to talk about with you is just like, where did you come from? Because it kind of, I know you've been around this area for a while, but it's just like you just exploded on the map in Greensboro.
Well, let's see. So I'm originally from England, but I've lived here for about 17 years. And been to school a couple of times. Went to Appalachian State for theater. And then I toured around as an actor for about 11, 12, 13 years.
Are you serious?
Mm-hmm.
Was that after Appalachian State?
Mm-hmm.
Where'd you go when you were touring?
Oh, everywhere. Omaha, Nebraska. We performed in New York. Performed in Washington D.C. Performed at the National Archives with an honor guard.
No kidding.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. We're doing this show called "Let My People Go" with the Touring Theater of North Carolina, and it was all based on court documents that a UNCG historian had compiled by going around to old courthouses around the South. And Brenda Schloinis had compiled some of those pieces into vignettes that kind of told the story of slavery in the South and how it affected how it affected everybody, in one way or another. And it's actually really kind of an interesting piece because it's not filtered. It's not someone's opinion. It's actually transcriptions of court documents. So that it's kind of eye opening.
Now, how do you prepare for something like that? I mean, how did they translate that to theater? Was it like a court case?
Yeah, each one was like a court case, and each section was put together thematically. And some of the stories were there'd be an appeal, or there'd be a letter to a lawyer, starting the case or whatever it may be. There's one case of a family who was attempting to basically acquire the goods that were deeded to them, including their freedom. But the problem was that if they moved back to North Carolina to claim the money that was owed to them from the will from their previous owner, that they would have to give up their freedom because the state of North Carolina would, make anybody a slave who returned back to the state.
They still do. No, no, that's nothing to joke about. I know it's.
Well, I mean, it's just sort of eye-opening. I mean, actually, the best performance we ever had of that show, or one of the most memorable ones was, we went to Franklinton, North Carolina, and there's this old plantation there, and the plantation was actually used as a site where owners would send their unruly slaves to be domesticated, and in pretty brutal ways.
How do you domesticate a slave?
They would, torture them, basically. And since that time, during Radical Reconstruction, it was turned into a school to educate former slaves to teach, and to become teachers. Anyway, there's nothing around this plantation for about 150 miles. And we did the show there. And the people who worked in this place, with a similar mission today, they slaughtered a pig, and we had barbecue. And people drove for 150 miles to come see this show.
Wow.
And, they hadn't seen, some of them hadn't seen theater, or, it's pretty moving, man,
How did you like that part of acting? And because that sounds like there's a lot of, or a wealth of information. Not only that, but just, I mean, if I was involved in something like that, I could see just like, wow, this is some strong, powerful stuff, which it sounds like you're explaining.
Yeah.
But have you ever thought about doing like a narrative or anything based upon that?
No, I haven't. I just did. Just now. No, actually, the only thing that I've ever considered doing a narrative of is based on what I think is probably the funniest book ever written, which is Leonard Nimoy wrote a book called I Am Not Spock. In the worst time in his acting career. They had just canceled Star Trek, and but he had done such a convincing job as playing a Vulcan that his theater career was over.
Right.
And he describes how he is playing a psychiatrist or a psychologist in a Chekhov play or something, and it's all going great, and like it's right after the show, and he finally got this role, and it was sort of off Broadway or something, and anyway he's doing the performance, and then he has one line which is, "That is not logical." And it's a serious play,
right.
And the entire audience like bursts into hysterics.
Oh my God.
And it's such a sad tale, man. I think about all those great character actors like Henry Winkler, as the Fonzins, like, they did such a great job that they will always be identified as that character, and it's such a shame that like
Jimmy Walker,
exactly, right,
Sha-na-na, like all the You see Bowser every time, even today he gets introduced as Bowser as like this old man who's still in his jacket and everything. It's sad that we can't accept these actors in different roles.
Yeah.
But it's funny you mentioned that because it's kind of ironic. Leonard Nimoy in a Chekhov play,
Right.
Isn't that Chekhov one of the Star Trek?
Yeah, one of the Star Trek characters, right? Yeah, actually, the book starts out where he says, I encountered a child on the street, and the child said, "Hey, look, that's Dr. Spock." And I said to him, "No, I am not Dr. Spock. I am Leonard Nimoy, an actor who plays a character named Dr. Spock on Star Trek." Man, he went to the depths. He really did. There's a couple of chapters where he's like talking about how he had to argue with the studio to give him pencils and postage so that he could respond to fan mail, and it's weird, man. I mean, he obviously had a total nervous breakdown, and he sent the manuscript out to like 15 or 16 different publishing houses, and only one picked up. And usually they publish like crap, pulp,
Yeah.
But it's classic.
That's now you could see everybody has a book now. There's so many publishing houses, and if you've been on TV, they'll publish anything. But that's really interesting. I never heard of that, or I never read it, so I didn't know anything about it. But so after, or are there any other experiences when you did that, theatrical for? I mean, 12 years. That's a lot of your time.
Yeah, it was. I mean, for a while I was like working 50 weeks out of 52, and I didn't know who I was from one week to the next, because I'd be in some show where I was like playing a neurotic priest, and then in another show where I was playing a farmer, or something like that. Always character roles, and in a lot of the ensemble pieces I'd be playing like 4 or 5 different characters in one show.
Wow.
And yeah, it was a little crazy, I mean, I don't know. I suffer from ADD, so it wasn't necessarily the best career choice for me. You know what I mean?
But what is a good career choice for someone with ADD?
I don't know, man. I don't know.
Like internet surfing?
Maybe, man. I've always got like 14 tabs open on my browser, man.
I'm the same way. I suffer from the same things. I get started on a project, then I'm like, oh yeah, this is going great. What about doing this? And then suddenly I start thinking about another project.
Yeah.
And then another one. And then I'm just like, I've got to stop and just focus on this one and get it going.
Yeah.
It's such a battle, man.
Yeah, it is hard. I mean, I think that's one of the things about the Harvey's Kitchen thing, is that it's good for me because it's something that I can focus in on the nuances of, because I've already nailed down the larger picture, But I think the thing that is most difficult is trying to figure out, okay, now I need to do the next project. Okay, so I'm thinking about 1,000,001 things, and instead now I can just focus on those 1,000,001 things while I'm actually in the process of doing it.
Right.
So was another experience. We did this show called Let Your Children Tell, which was funded by a grant from the North Carolina Holocaust Foundation. And it was all transcriptions. Well, it was diary entries and a bunch of other things. It was one of the few shows where I actually got to play one character throughout the whole show. And I played this character named Jürgen Bassfreund, who was actually a real person. This amateur documenter had gone around Europe in 1946 and gone to displacement camps where Jewish people who had lost all their property and that kind of stuff were waiting for a place to either go to Israel, be rehoused somewhere else within Europe. And he was a totally obscure character, but he felt like this was something that he needed to do. So he went to these displacement camps and he had people tell the story of what they went through in the Holocaust. And there's the original tapes don't exist anymore.
Oh man.
But the transcriptions do. And the character I played was Jürgen Bassfreund, who had since become a painter, moved to the United States, and changed his name to Jack Bass, and now lives in Florida. and it's a pretty crazy story. I mean, the guy, um, he goes to like 4 or 5 different concentration camps. He survives for like 3.5 years, going from Majdanek to Bergen-Belsen to Auschwitz and back again. He also went through the Death March, in 1945.
Mm-hmm.
He got typhus. Um, when the Red Cross picked him up, he weighed 64 pounds.
Holy cow!
And we did a performance of that show, and the first time we did a performance of the show, they invited Holocaust survivors from all over North Carolina to come see the show.
How does that make you feel as an actor? I mean, that's kind of...
Well, performance is about live performance is about your craft
Mm-hmm.
and your ability to connect with the character, be able to tell the story, be able to invest in that character and that story. But also it's about how it resonates with the audience, because the audience gives as much
Mm-hmm.
to that performance as the cast, And to have all those people out in the audience, you could just feel the weight and the power. And
Mm-hmm.
there was one character in that show who had died a couple weeks beforehand of cancer, and her husband, who was also a character mentioned in the show, and their kids were actually at the show, and they were hearing stories about their mother that she had never told them.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
So afterwards, how did they? Did you guys meet and talk?
Yeah, actually, one of the most like moving interactions I had ever had was after that show, and this Holocaust survivor from Majdanek came up to me after the show, and she looked me in the eye and she said, that was exactly how we felt. And then I just thought, wow, that to feel that way for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, that really kind of brought it home for me.
It's interesting because when you just said the displacement, I've never really given it any real true thought about what it meant like afterwards. Like I used to look at Israel as a state that was kind of like America. We just came in and took over a land, and I always felt like it was kind of it's just like you're doing the same thing that just happened to you in Germany by taking over this land, kicking out the people. Although they weren't killing them, they weren't massacring. But I never thought about the fact of, it's not like they can go back to Germany and go live a normal life anymore.
Right.
Because they were so persecuted and genocide, everything. It's just, so I never even took that into consideration. And just, that's powerful just to think that way about, where do we go? This country that I lived in tried to kill all of us.
Yeah.
Afterwards, we can't just go back and be like, yeah, everything's fine.
Yeah. I mean, it's a complicated story, because of that, I think. Definitely because of that. But, the other side of that is a pretty painful tale, too,
Sure.
A lot of, Palestinians were displaced from their farmlands and that kind of stuff. And I don't think there's any easy...
There's no
straightforward answer to that at all.
There's no like big piece of land that's open
right
anymore. Everything's being, well, they could have moved to like the deserts in America, or they could have done like Salt Lake City, like the Mormons done with Utah.
Yeah,
just change that whole state. So you did 12 years, and then what happened after your acting?
I was actually I had auditioned for the show, and I didn't get the role.
What show was that?
It was the Battle of Shallowford, and
was that a TV show?
No. It was a theater piece.
Oh, okay.
And I thought I was like really well suited for the role, and the guy that got cast was like the total antithesis of me.
Uh-huh.
Like he was like an athlete, and like he weighed like 220 pounds, and to me that was like the absolute opposite of what was in the text. You know, it was supposed to be this kind of outcast character that was somewhat nerdy and constantly talked about how he wasn't good at, you know, athletics and stuff like that. Anyway, I'm watching the show, and there's this guy in the show named Roger Black. And Roger Black was probably one of the funniest actors I had ever witnessed. He could stand on stage and say nothing, and he would have you in hysterics. But in a way that was invested in the character, you know.
Sure.
And he suffered from emphysema, and so as a consequence, he was having memory problems. So this was a swan song performance, and he had maybe 3 lines in the whole piece, and he showed up on stage 4 times, and it was a really moving performance. I was in. It was one of the first times where I was like totally invested in the show. I was watching. I wasn't picking it apart like, oh, this is, you know, the blocking's not good, or, you know,
right.
this. Anyway, he, you know, it was a really moving performance. And then a few months later, he couldn't act anymore because he couldn't remember any lines. He got a job as a security guard, and he died.
Mm.
And then I started thinking, is that the way I'm going to end up, man?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wanted, about that time too, I was we put a group of us from Greensboro actors. I put this improv troupe together called Comedy Salad, and we would put on like improv shows where, you know, we would get a couple of things from the audience, like a theme and an object, you know, like banana and war, and we would do like a whole show in an hour that was completely improvised based upon those things, and it was really fun. And I got to direct and rehearsals and that kind of stuff, and I loved it. I totally loved it, you know. So it got me thinking that I wanted to be more involved in that end of the process. Anyway, I was joking around with a couple of my friends. I was like, "Yeah, man, I should go to the School of the Arts." And somebody said, "Yeah, you should go to the School of the Arts."
Now,
Yeah.
was that for undergrad?
Yeah.
So you didn't finish App State?
No.
How far did you get?
I'd been there for 3.5 years.
Oh, so you had a half a year left.
Right. Yeah.
I know so many people that, you know, are incredibly intelligent who do everything, and then right at the last semester they're like, "Oh, I'll finish this later."
Yeah. It wasn't so much for that for me. I don't know. I had, you know, run out of money. You know, I just couldn't.
That happens too.
And
But did that tour, the acting tour thing, come along also at that time?
no, actually, it was totally sort of tangential. I had I don't know. I got out of, you know, I finished what I had left Boone, you know, and I came back to Greensboro, and you know, I was having some emotional problems too because my parents, I came from a divorced family, and you know, I made the decision to move here, and there was a lot of like arguing backwards and forwards between my parents, and I was having to deal with that emotionally,
Sure.
while also at the same time dealing with the fact that I had undiagnosed ADD, and how do I manage, like, you know, 18 hours worth of coursework and, you know, that kind of stuff. So, you know, that all that sort of came to a head, and I wasn't really in any sort of emotional state to be able to go back to school. And so I did a lot of reading, and, you know, I was working like 3 jobs at like Dunkin' Donuts and a dishwasher at Outback Steakhouse, and then I also waited tables at Sal's Italian Pizza.
Sal's. Everyone works Sal's.
Yeah, man, that's a great spot, you know.
Frank. Famuga.
Minga. It's funny because I was waiting tables there one time, and I was with this guy, and it was an Italian guy and his girlfriend or whatever, you know. And everybody's in the back because it's like really, you know, it's really busy, and it's like furniture week, and all these, like, you know, big Italians from New York were down to purchase, you know, their furniture or whatever. and they're hearing like people going, ah, minga, minga, minga in the back. And this girl says, I'm passing by the table, and this girl says to this guy, she said, honey, what's minga mean? And he goes, babe, it's the best part of a man.
What was her comment after that? I'd like to hear.
She goes, oh, okay.
She'd be like, and which is?
Yeah.
That's interesting. So who else have you met through Sal's? I mean,
A bunch of guys actually. It's funny, and they all actually turned out to be like pretty successful in one way or another. There was Jose who worked on the line, and he's like a big time hairdresser, lives down in Florida now, and like gets paid thousands and thousands of dollars for a haircut. There's a VJ I met at Sal's, who's my business partner. And I don't know, a bunch of guys, and they all turn out to be like designers or photographers, or I think it was sort of like this it was definitely a melting pot. There was a lot of guys there that were recent residents from different countries, or students from different countries.
The actual international crowd over at UNCG would always, it was like a filter through.
Yeah.
Because I worked at Sal's for about on and off for about 6 months, and then another 6 months. Huh. So it's weird I didn't come across your path.
Yeah, that's weird.
I was a dishwasher, then I started waiting tables, but it was like back and forth.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, I made pizza there. I worked on the line a little bit. I helped Frank make a lasagna once.
Frank was great because he explained to me the whole U.S. Economy history within like 30 minutes. It was like I was waiting to get my paycheck, and he wanted to tell me this story before he gave it to me. He's just like, well, before I give you this, you have to listen. He's like, this American money, it's not money, it's a reserve note. He's just like, it's not real currency. Then he started going in about the whole the IRS and how the money isn't real money, and it was just so funny. But actually, doing some research, he was right on a lot of points. Yeah. And so it was just, at the time I was so young, I was just like, oh, stop it, just give me my paycheck. And I was like, oh, that was interesting. He was trying to, educate me in my own government.
Yeah. He was an interesting cat, man.
He was really nice, but man, that guy had a belly just...
And why? Why was that, man?
He was always moving, Yeah. He was on his feet all day and just moving around.
I think it was because he drank all that mineral water, man. You know what I mean?
All the carbonation started building up. So how long have you lived in Greensboro?
On and off for about 17 years.
Wow. When I say, so you go back to the School of Arts, or you go to the School of Arts just based on somebody going, yeah, why don't you?
Well, and then I've always loved film, always, and on Saturday mornings we used to go down to this place called the Odeon, which is we had one movie theater in my hometown, and I used to watch Flash Gordon, Champion the Wonder Horse, shorts of Charlie Chaplin, Laurel and Hardy on a huge screen, like thousands of screaming kids there. And, the parents would drop us off, and it was like this place where there was solace, because there was always like some kind of strife in my family, So to go there, and have, a few pence, to spend on some popcorn and maybe a soda or whatever, and then to sit there for a couple of hours and watch all these things, it was like, you could just leave, it was just beautiful.
That's what it's there for, Yeah. That's what movies are great.
And anyway, so when someone said that, sort of confirmed that, I said, oh, okay. So I applied, and everybody encouraged me, and I thought, well, there's no way in hell they're gonna take me, There's just no way, And Orson Scott Card, who was a fiction teacher of mine, wrote me a recommendation letter, which I was totally shocked. And Stephen G. and Brenda Schloinis from the Birch Theater and Touring Theater of North Carolina wrote me recommendations. And I went there, and that part of the part of the application process was that you had to, they'd give you sort of an orientation of the film school, and then they'd sit you down in this big auditorium, and they'd pass out these postcards, like black and white, some color or whatever. You're supposed to take one and then pass it to the person to your right. And so people were just taking one off the top and passing it to the right. And I looked at them and I was like, well, I'm just going to pick one that I like, you know.
Yeah.
So I picked one that I liked and passed it on. And they said, okay, you have an hour to write a 3-page story based upon this picture. And so I was like, okay. So I started writing this story, and it turned out that they only gave you like 30 minutes, you know. But I got to like page 2.5. And anyway, so then they take you in for this orientation. And Richard Claybaugh was one of my the guys that interviewed me, and he happened to be a big fan of Orson Scott Card.
Mm-hmm.
And they want you to pitch like the rest of the story to them, you know. So I did, and it was a story about this kid who was, you know, he burned down the school, and it was an accident, and, you know, he's whatever. And it was a comedy, and they, you know, they liked it. Anyway, so I was like, well, you know, it kind of went well, but at the same time, there's like 4,000 applicants. They're only taking 70 people. You know? There's just no way, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I was watching other people. Other people brought a reel. Some people brought like photographs that were like super high contrast, black and white on like nitrate prints, and you know, it was crazy. Anyway, so a couple months later, I get an acceptance letter. I didn't have any financial plan to go to this school.
Right.
You know, I was like, wait, I actually got in? You're crazy. And so anyway, I told some of my friends, I was like, man, you know, I got in, but, you know, there's no way I can afford this. And I was like, wait, you know, so anyway, it's great that they would have taken me. All of my friends got together and wrote me checks so that I could pay for my first semester of school.
Holy sh...
I went to the registrar's office with 14 checks in my hand, all of them written by friends of mine.
Now, how much is it a year?
The tuition, not including on-campus tuition, not including books, not including anything, was like $1,600.
$1,600
a semester.
I mean,
And there are 3 semesters each year.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I mean, that's reasonable, but still, coming from your friends, that's amazing. That's a great group of friends.
And then the next years, I actually got a full scholarship.
Nice.
And then the last year, I went up to the dean's office and I talked to the secretary and I said, look, I'm going to have to ask for money again. And she said, we don't have any money. And so
that was it?
That was it.
So you haven't finished?
Nope.
You need to get in touch with your friends and
yeah.
where are they now?
I don't know, man.
They're all successful, you said before. Come on, guys.
Well, you know, I mean, I don't know. I don't think it matters that much.
I don't think so either.
I went to this friend's house in Eflin, and he was a very successful singer. He'd been in a couple of bands, and you know, been signed on to major labels and all that kind of stuff. And I always got hung up on that idea, you know, like I didn't finish school or whatever, you know. And you know, I was always sort of embarrassed to disclose that because, you know, somehow that was maybe a mark of me being a failure or whatever. And she relayed the story to me, and it was totally unsolicited. She didn't know really much about me at all. And she said that when she was 18, her grandmother gave her an option. She said, I'll either buy you a farm, I'll give you money so that you can buy a farm, or you can go to school. And she bought a farm.
No other options? Can I just get the money?
No. She bought a farm, and she's extremely well read, very successful, and I guess maybe it's just not for everybody. You know?
No, you're right. It's not. And there are a lot of places that I think a lot of people need degrees in order to go forward on. But I think in our field, that's one of the things that you don't really need unless you want to be an executive.
Yeah.
You know, because I have a friend who works at HBO documentaries, and she works with one of the top. She's like the assistant for Sheila Nevins. top dog in HBO documentaries, and she was telling me, I was just like, well, how do I get into like HBO? What would I need to do? She's like, well, it's all a bunch of corporate people, I mean, if you get your master's, you'd have a good shot, but and I don't want to be stuck in a building, worrying about all these things that have to go into production, or I don't want to know about all the things that hold up production or anything else. I want to just create and keep moving forward. It's just like, all right, you guys are going to pay me to do this. Let's do it. Here you go. Whenever it's ready, go ahead.
Right.
Next, I think that's what like you and myself and a lot of other people are meant to do. And you got the tools, definitely.
Well, I just think about some of my favorite filmmakers, and they have a similar story. Even my favorite actors, they have a similar story. I don't know, they're creators, and they go out and they create things, but most of them are dropouts.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Some of the things that I found working on a couple of reality shows is a lot of the people that work together, they met through film school.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but I'm not talking like UNCG or I couldn't say the same for School of the Arts because I didn't go there, but a lot of the smaller film programs that they offer film programs on their lot, but it's not like School of the Arts or SCAD,
Mm-hmm.
or art institutes or even USC, because the networking just doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
The professors are real producers, real directors, editors, cinematographers, gaffers. And that's where you get to step up, man. You get taught by one of those people that are in the industry and they like what you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
or you show interest. They're going to put you through their connections.
Right.
And you're going to start at the bottom just like everywhere else, but you're going to be working with real people in the industry.
Right. And
moving forward. And it's just it's tough to do that in this kind of market.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I'm fortunate in that way because, I'm in contact with a lot of those guys, and they're all working on different films or different projects,
Exactly.
So, I talk to most of them each week.
And that's your contacts through the School of the Arts?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're all really talented kids, and my former professors and whatnot, so.
And that's the thing, Richard Clayball, you talked about, and I'm very familiar with him, with All Aces. We go up and watch Dogs with him, and we watch his stuff, Iborgs,
Mm-hmm.
and he talks about the passion of filmmaking, what it used to be like and what it is now, these days. And the funny, it's not funny, it's kind of sad, but, the School of the Arts is now looking for professors or instructors to have their masters. And I think that just takes away from, these acclaimed, people that work in the industry.
Yeah.
That don't have the masters. These are people who are actually working and shooting films, and now they have to have a master's to teach. I think it's ridiculous. But a lot of schools are doing that throughout the state of North Carolina.
Right, to get the proper accreditation from the state of North Carolina.
Because now the school has to be accredited, and
Right.
they need these certain standards in order to get money from the state.
What do you think about like Spielberg, right? I mean, he went back to school after Schindler's List to finish his degree.
Right.
He went to like night school or whatever, and he quietly got his diploma. I mean, like, come on, it's ridiculous, man. I mean, I think it was important to him to go back and
Sure.
and get it. And then after that, he did Catch Me If You Can. It did change his filmmaking a little bit.
But could you imagine being a professor and looking in there's Steven Spielberg?
You're like, seriously? Seriously? Come on, man.
It's just like, all right, look,
Yeah.
you're gonna have to talk. We're gonna talk to you throughout the rest of the semester.
Yeah. I think the School of the Arts is a wonderful school. I mean, it really kind of tests your limits, and it made me a more confident individual.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that I could shoot a 5-minute film narrative on a soundstage from setup to breakdown in less than 3 hours.
Yeah.
And it not turn out to be terrible.
Nice.
And that, and being able to manage every weekend a different shoot in a different position.
And plus, you learn all the different positions too. Like
Right.
you're not just a director, right? You also
Director, producer, production coordinator, PA, gaffer, key grip, director of photography, whatever it may be.
right.
So yeah, it was a great education, and I'm glad I did it. But
You probably learned more in one semester than I did my entire time at UNCG.
I just wish that there was more theory, in the first year, and the first and second years. I really wish that there was like a class where we were focusing in on one director or a couple of directors, or since that time I've kind of done it on my own.
You know what I'd like to see is something where, what sells.
Yeah.
Just have one class of like how to distribute,
Yeah.
and cut all bullshit aside. Let's talk about what sells. Like if it's action films, this is what you expect.
Yeah.
Especially independent films.
Yeah.
Like how hard it is to get a drama. Like you put out a drama, the only people who would be interested worldwide probably the United States, Canada, and England.
Yeah.
But you do an action film, that's global distribution right away.
Yeah.
Everyone loves action. But also, what's hot, how to get into the film market business. Just a lot of different things that I wish that they could explore. I don't know if they do them. This is just my experience when I was at school.
They had this thing. We did have producing classes, and actually there was some really talented producing faculty there, one of which wrote the American Film Institute's Guide to Filmmaking. And if you went up to their office and you talked to them, they would talk you through it, and they would invite guests to talk about just those kinds of things, So there was like during intensive arts where you had no classes, but they had all these different workshops that you'd go to, and they bring in guests and all that kind of stuff. There'd be one on the horror movie and how to sell one, and different genres. Speaking of which, man, I saw a crazy film the other night that I thought was just fantastic, man.
Harvey is very humble, and he's a really good filmmaker, and he has a lot of talent around him, so he's going to do really well. And I just say, keep it up, Harvey. Check out part 2 when I post that. I want to thank Harvey and his girlfriend, Carolyn, for putting up with me in the midst of my caffeine rush. Thanks for listening to part 1 of this conversation with Harvey Robinson on Talent Freaks. Harvey Robinson's dedication to storytelling and visual craftsmanship continues to shape the independent film scene. His ability to bring compelling narratives to life through cinematography and direction is truly inspiring. To explore more of Harvey's work, visit his Vimeo page at vimeo.com/HarveyKRobinson. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and rate the podcast. It truly helps others discover these incredible stories, and I am incredibly grateful for that. And if you're interested in following me, check out talentfreaks.com, where you can see some of the videos I worked on and the photography that I'm currently doing, which I'm so in love with. Until next time, keep exploring, keep creating, and stay curious.